Well, our correspondent Iris Makler is on the ground in Jerusalem for us. We can speak to her now. Iris, growing international calls for a ceasefire, but the aerial campaign continues. What can you tell us?
I can tell you that there was the first midday volley, if you like, of rockets, 100 rockets all the way up into Tel Aviv, into that area, central Israel targeted once again. And also a long-range missile that went down to the area of Eilat. That's a 200-mile distance. And what was interesting that we have heard is that Hamas said it was aiming for the airport. And indeed, there are reports that the airport down in Eilat, there's a southern airport as well, that airport was shut. I have read reports, but I haven't seen official confirmation of this, that also there was an Air Force base that was shut too, or that was under rocket fire, also in the south of the country. So we're seeing that ramping up from Hamas. We're seeing airstrikes and attacks on cells of Hamas and Islamic Jihad fighters at the same time as I think the international community is starting to rev itself up into trying to stop this and to pull the two sides apart. It does take an umpire going on past experience. We have heard that there is now an official delegation from Cairo in Tel Aviv to try and start that ball rolling, an envoy from Washington as well, Qatari feelers out to Qatar, which has links to Hamas. So that ball is starting to get rolling, but on the ground, it hasn't had any impact yet.
Yeah, Iris, another key thing that's happening on the ground is there's been yet another night of communal violence inside Israel between Jewish Israelis and the Arab minority. What can you tell us about what's been happening on that front?
I can tell you that from an Israeli point of view, that's a very, very worrying really is very worrying. I've heard people saying that it's actually more worrying than the potential of a war with Gaza because it's a civil war. It's an internal war. We saw, for example, in a city like Lod, not far from Tel Aviv, where people live together, Jews and Muslims, sometimes in the same street, sometimes in the same building. And they rub along, as best they can, and suddenly there's no rubbing along. There's fires in the street. It looks like a war zone. People attack each other with knives and clubs for the second night, even though there was last night supposed to be a state of emergency. It didn't stop any of that. This morning, someone was stabbed there. We've seen mobs attacking, a Jewish mob attacking an Arab man, an Arab mob attacking a Jewish man, both those victims now in hospital. The mayor of the town of Lod says that Israel is on the brink of a civil war, and Israel's prime minister came out after midnight on television, very rare in itself, and told the citizens of Israel that this has to stop. It's anarchy and Israel can't deal with it. And it certainly can't deal with it if it's trying to run some kind of, I don't want to use the word war, but lower grade conflict with Hamas.
All right, Iris Makler in Jerusalem. Stay safe and thank you very much indeed for your reporting.